Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we Masechtas Avodah Zarah daf Nun Hey. We are going to begin on Nun Hey with Aleph, about 6 lines from the top. Shal Agrifus Sarsava. So the great general by the name of Agrifus approached and asked a question to Rabbi Gamliel. On one hand, it's written in the entire Ki Hashem Elokecha Eish Achalhu Kelkana, which we quoted before, that Hashem has this strong passion that he certainly hates anyone who is engaged in Avodah Zarah. He's jealous. So klum iskana el chacham b'chacham. So the only way a person should be jealous is if you're like from one to the next. V'gibor, v'asher, v'asher. So in other words, for you to be able to be jealous at something, then it has to be that you have some type of connection to that person. It's not that they're so far removed from you. It says Rashi, so he was not Jewish. He was in charge of all the armies. So a person married a woman, including his other wife. Notice he has a second wife. So, and it turns out chashuva mimena, if she's more chashiv, ein miskana, then the first wife is not in miskanaba, is not going to get jealous because the first wife knows that she is more chashiv than the second one. However, pachusa mimena, if the second wife is less, then miskaneba, then they will be jealous. What does that mean? So Rashi says, Ishta Rishayna enu makpedes kokach l'saynes bala. She's not going to hate her husband so much in this situation. Aval im pchusa mimena, if she's lower than him, miskanu makpedes alav l'sanaso, then she'll actually hate him. In other words, it's kind of like this. If you have you have me, or you have Hashem, which is I'm so great, and then you take this lowly God, so it's more insulting. So the first wife, on some level, if you take a woman who's more chashiv, you can say, well, okay, she's more chashiv. However, if the second one is worse, then in that situation, then the first wife is really upset, because like, what do you mean? You were with me. Why would you be with her? Armule zainin Rabbi Akiva. In my heart, in your heart, we all know that idol worship has no meaning, has no power. The asu ki mitzamdi. I've seen people that they end up. This was a Yisrael that was asking this question. I've seen them that they were lame, going to Avodas Kachavim. They had problems with their limbs, and all of a sudden they're able to walk when they leave. So my time, it seems almost as though that those idols are powerful. So there's a trustworthy person, and people deposited money by him without witnesses. Then you have another person, even though everyone trusted him, one particular person gave him money with witnesses. Pam echad shakach, he forgot the hifkid etzlo shlo be'edim, and he ended up giving him without witnesses. So amru lo ishto, so his wife said, boy, go v'nich parenu, and deny this deposit, because after all there was no witnesses this time. So just because this person was doing things improperly, anu nevid es amnusenu, I should lose my trust. People trust us. So avkach yisurin avkach yisurin, when it comes to yisurin, b'shah shemishagrin isol adam, when yisurim are placed upon a person, it may be only for a certain amount of time. And therefore, maspino is so shlo telchu el biyoim ploni. These afflictions will only last for a particular amount of time. There's an expiration date, which Hashem has. Of course, we don't know it. That's the reality. L'teitzu el biyoim ploni. That on a particular day, it will remove. It doesn't make any difference what you do. That's the Gezerah Samelach. Uvashah ploinus at that time happens to be alidi ploini by this person, alidi sam ploini, this medication. Kivanshe gives mana. Once that time comes, let's say for the illness to go away, the guy happened to stroll into an idol worship house. So Amri Yisurin, say dinhu shlu neitze. I should really stay with this guy because I don't want people to think it's because of the Avodah Zarah. Just because this person did something not properly by walking into a base of Avodah Zarah, anu nevid shvuah, we should remove our shvuah. No, it'll happen regardless, and that's the point. What does it mean in emanim? Royim b'shlichusan, v'nemanim b'shvuasan. So as Rashi says, they are bad for your body, it causes pain. However, they will be removed in its a proper time, no matter where you happen to be. Doesn't make any difference. Okay. Actually, I wrote over here, this is really old news, but I guess it was news. Roseanne Arnold, who was a comedian, she was healed after 48, I'm not sure what I wrote over here. She was ill for a long time. She had a significant illness, and she went into a mosque. And she left the mosque, and apparently she swears that she's better. She's also a Yid. Again, that doesn't mean anything, right? But you could equate where you are to, oh, now I feel better. It doesn't necessarily mean that that was the reason. I know in my city, when they need rain, what do? This idol appears in a dream. The Armuluhu Shachtuli Gavra, kill a person, the Isi Mitra, and rain will come. Shachtuli Gavra, they killed someone, the Asi Mitra, and all of a sudden it started to rain. So you see there is power apparently. My answer is Amuli Hashta, Ihavi Shechivna, Lo Amrulahu, Hamilsa. It happened to be that you saw this, like while you're lying down, this matter would have happened anyway. The Amarav might have said, Asher Chalak Hashem Alkecha Oisam, L'chol Amim Malamid, Shemechalikin B'dvarim, that I'll make them slip, I'll make them make mistakes. Kedei L'tardin Min Oilam. And basically, you're right. It's possible that these things could happen, but as Rashi says, Menichin L'tois. Sometimes Hashem allows these things to happen so that people will think that an Avodah Zarah has mamish, and therefore, because of our bechira, yeah, it's possible that these things could happen, and it could really have a strong appearance that it was because of the Avodah Zarah. But that's on you. What does it mean when it says in the pasuk in Mishlei, Imel leitzim hu yolitz v'navim yitin chein? So what do we learn out from there? So if you want to become tameh, if you want to go down, then that door will open for you. However, if you want to better yourself, not only will a door open for you, but actually Hashem will help you. Says the next Mishnah. Says the Masnisin. A Jew can buy from a wine press from an Ovi Kachavim. Now, this is a pretty amazing chiddush. Afal pishu noitel biyadai, even though he was actually touching the wine, the noisen latapuach, and it was put onto this pile. Says Rashi, anavim miteich yayin ba'adoshim shogash shikarin maish. So apparently, why would this be allowed? Says Rashi, v'ksavar tanadidan loy havi yayin esach ad shir labor. So basically what happens, there's a pipe that brings it down into the pit, and only then is it considered to be yayin, to be called yayin nesach. However, before that, before it's drained down into the bottom pit, at that point when it's above, it's not considered to be yayin nesach, and therefore you could purchase this. However, says the Mishnah, in oise yayin nesach, the enun oise yayin nesach ad shir labor, which again is the whole point. Your labor, once it actually goes down into the pit, mashbabor aser. Obviously, what's in the bor is aser because that is yain nesach. However, v'hashar mutter. Everything that's not in the pit, in the gas above, will be mutter. Okay, so Rashi says that dorchin im ovikachavim begas. Okay, actually, let's first see the this line in the Gemara. Dorchin im ovikachavim begas. So a person can work together with an akum in the gas, again, which is the upper part of this wine, because as we said, since the wine is only an issue when it goes into the bor, not into the gas, therefore you are able to work together with him. Says Rashi, V'lo amrinan, we don't say mishtakir b'isuri hanahu, that you're benefiting from isur hana. De'afilu b'shtia, even drinking it, savar haitan dedeshar, it's still, you want to drink that part. Kozman shel yar labor. So as long as it hasn't hit the bor, so you can actually drink it even. Mishim garim tuma leka. There's not an issue of tuma. Shemisha shedarach ba darach behen ovikachavim ma'at nitma'u. Mishim Messiah yedei oiver aveira leka she'ovikachavim will nitstavo akach. So the guy made it tummy before, so it's not an issue of tuma, and it's not like you're helping him anyway because the ovikachavim is not matsuva on this. Says Taisus, Perashikushas Mishum Gram Tuma Leka, the Mishash Shedarach Bahen Ovikachavim Ma'at Nitmu. It was already tummy by him. So therefore there's no reason to say it is an issue. Okay, so that's what the Mishnah says, that Darchanim Ovikachavim Begas, that you're allowed to work together with the beginning processes at the top part of which is in the vat. However, as we continue Nun Haman Bays of a little bites in Nemo, but you're not allowed to actually pick the grapes off the vines with the akum. Why not? So Rashi says Lafi Shenaisin Begas Tuma, because there will be an increase of Tuma, regarding Tumo, and you're causing Tuma. Why? She Nisnan Legas L'Shem Dericha who darchisan titamam. The kainim dericha vade l'mekabli toma. Before there was no toma, the mastama l'hochsharu. Al kamashmon habaytz l'gas hochshar hainu heicha de hochshar vadai. G'savar also ligrum toma l'chulin shebe'eretz Yisrael. Even for chulin, you cannot cause something to become tamei. Okay, and then the Mishnah says. Actually, let's before we go to the Mishnah, finish the Mishnah. Let's look at question 1. Now, why are we allowing you to work together with akum in the gas? So as we saw, because the time that he started doing this, even a little bit, the akum already made everything tamei. So why is it not an issue of Messiah Yedei over Avera? So that's also not an issue because they're not akum is not matsuva on this regarding making things tamei. Okay. All right. So again, let's go back to the top line of Nun Hamid Beis. Yisrael shu oyisa batoma. If you have a Yisrael who doesn't really care about the dinim of Tumah Tahara, and the question is if you're going to work with him, lo darchin. You can't do anything with him. You can't. Not only you're not allowed to pick up the grapes, you can't even work in the gas with him. Says Rashi, ha'isa peiroisav betuma, because he's not makbid about tuma. So in oiver verahu, sher nitzav al kach, he is commanded about not making things tameh. Hilka chafil darchin nami aser, because you're being messiah, you're helping him, and therefore that's not allowed. As Rashi says, v'asu l'sayeh yedei over avera. You can't assist these sinners. Elo parshi mehen. You have to distance yourself from them. Kadei sheyargu b'kach, so you don't become accustomed in their behavior. Avav kachavim lav over averahu shalom nitztava. As we said, an Omer Kachavim is not commanded into the dinim of not making things tameh, and therefore it's not an issue. And that's why you're allowed to, as we saw before, darchin im ha'oived kachavim begas. Okay, so that's a distinction between Akum, who's not mitzvah, and the Yisrael, who's just not makbin tumah, but he really is mitzvah to not make things tameh. Okay, abu malichin im chaviyos legas. You could help him bring empty tummy barrels to the gas, umavin imo min a gas. So why is that allowed? And the reason is, Rashi says these barrels are empty, and you're allowed to bring them and fill them up with wine, and that's not an avera. Says Rashi, to be achar shenitmo begas, since it already was tameh, mutulas sayan b'chavis tameas. So even though it's true these barrels are tameh because you're dealing with a person who doesn't care about the din of tumah, so we just say it's tameh. So therefore, why would it be allowed? Because since the barrels are tameh, but the wine is also tameh, tameh wine can go into a tameh barrel. On a similar vein, nachdam shu oisem b'tumah, if a baker who's not making the din of tumah tahara, lo loshin v'lo oichin imo, you're not allowed to knead the dough or braid the challah with him. Avo malichin imo pas lepalter, but you can carry the raw loaves to the baker in a tameh oven. Again, because it's already tameh, so it doesn't matter. So therefore it's allowed. Says the Gemara. Let's just look at this Rashi first. So you can take this and put it into the gas. Actually, it says Lepalter she'oifa es apas, the one who bakes the bread. Okay, let's go into the Gemara. So Omar Rav Huna. Let's focusing on the words of Rav Huna. Yayin. When it comes to wine, it's kivan shehiskil himashech. As soon as it starts flowing down from the gas on its, because what it is, there's like two levels, and you crush the grapes, and then the juice flows down on a little bit of a decline, and then it ends up falling through a small opening into the bore, as we call it. So yayin kivon shehiskil himashech oise yayin nesach. So it's considered, once it's starting to flow, it's already yayin nesach, which again doesn't sound like our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says only once it hits the bore. But nonetheless, that's what he says. Says Rashi, shagas asui lamirdoin, because again the gas is at a decline, so that the liquid will allow gravity to take its course. As soon as it starts flowing, even though it hasn't hit the bore, it's still considered to be wine. Therefore, it could potentially be yain nesach. Tanan. So we learned in our Mishnah, loichin gas ba'uta min ha'avikachavim v'avol b'yishenalto b'yodam v'noisin l'tapuach. So this is a kasha. We just said before that you are allowed to deal with the wine in the gas, even apparently if it's flowing at a downward slope, because it hasn't yet reached the bore, because it only becomes yayin once it hits the bore. So apparently that's a kasha in Rav Huna. So Rav Huna, begas bekuka umaleya. We're talking about a pipe that is closed up, and the vat is filled up already with grapes. So in that situation, it's mutter, since it never went anywhere. But if the pipe was open, it would be yayin once it's flowing down. So basically it's just saying that if the pipe is closed, then you can deal with it on the top. But once the pipe is open, and therefore the liquid starts pouring down, then already at that point it's considered to be yayin, and potentially yayin nesach. Okay, let's look at question 2. My time demand aser lidreich im avikachav begas, the eich metaritz l'masdisin deshari. So he holds that wine, as soon as it starts to go down, it's considered to be yain nesach, and therefore you're not allowed to work with the akum. However, a Mishnah that says you are allowed to is, we're talking about begas bekuka, it's closed up. When you squeeze it, it just stays in its place. It's not going down. So therefore, it's considered not to be wine yet. However, if it would have been open and it started flowing, even in a down, once it goes flowing in a downward motion toward the pipe to go into the gas, according to him, it's automatically going to it's constituted as yain already. Okay, and that's what Rashi says. Pakuka is shul yachal li'erid. It can't go down. It's filled with grapes. It's not moving. The place where you squeezed it, it's staying. It hasn't moved. Tashma. Our Mishnah sounds again to be unlike the Shita Rav Huna. So that's specifically in that situation, it's only the bore. However, once you open up the pipe, so then at that point, it's going to be yain even before. Tashma. Yar labor, let's say once it goes into the pit, masha babor aser v'ashar mutter. So why? Why is everything above mutter? I thought once it's flowing, it's considered to be yain. So Rav Huna lo kasha. Kan b'mishnah rishayna, kan b'mishnah achrayna. There's actually the first interpretation, and then there's a second. What does that mean? So, the Sanya. So there's actually two phases in halacha, which we're calling phase 1, Mishnah Rishayna, and Mishnah Achrayna is phase 2. Rishayna initially, Hayu Oimrim Badad. Now that is an acronym, and we'll see what that stands for. Ein Beitzrin, Es Im Ovikachavim, Begas. So the bays is beitzrin. That, as we said, you're not allowed to pick grapes off the vines together with ovikachavim. Begas. She'asa ligram tuma l'chulin shemeretz Yisrael. Because you're not allowed to cause more tuma even for chulin. The ein dorchin, that's the dalid, im Yisrael she'oisa peiroisa b'tuma. And you're not allowed to even be involved with like pressing the grapes on the top with a yid, because as we said, he is matsuva on tuma. But darchim, which is this last dalid, you are allowed, even though it's true that you cannot be darchin with the Yisrael, but you could be darchin imo v'kachavim begas. And we're not concerned l'derav huna. We're not concerned of the concern of Rav Huna that it becomes yain even before. The chazru loimer devad, and then later on we changed it from bedad to debad. What is that? Ein darchin im havikachavim begas mishum Rav Huna. Actually, you're not allowed to normally be on the top because of the issue with Rav Huna. That he says that as soon as it starts going in a downward motion, at that point already it's considered to be yayin, and therefore you're not allowed to do that. So that again is the change that originally we didn't hold like Rav Huna. We thought that maybe it's only considered to be yayin on the bottom in the gas, and now we learn like Rav Huna that's even before. As we continue Nun Vamud Aleph, the ein beitzrin imam chachavim shoysa peirasa b'toma. However, you're not allowed to pick the grapes off with the vines with the akum, because again you're causing tuma. Koshkein she'ein darchen, and you're not allowed to pick the grapes, and certainly you cannot be darchen. Avol beitzrin imam chachavim begas. However, you could be beitzer with akum begas. Shemot ligrum tumul chulin shemeretz Yisrael. Okay, I'm going to stop there. But let's me see a couple more questions. TA 7. What's the din im darchin im akamagas? Now our Mishnah again said darchin im akamagas, that you can. Okay, so but obviously they want just more than that. Uma hanidoin im boitzin akamagas. So again, just Pashut, our Mishnah says that you could be darchin, but you cannot be beitzrin because of your germ tuma. However, umaskana, it's not so simple. Bidarchin, when it comes to being on the top, so hanidain mimatei haviyain, it's all totally on when it becomes wine. Is it when it's in the bore and therefore it's mutter, or is it even when it's flowing and therefore it's usser, with the exception if the bore was the pipe was closed up. When it comes to be beitzrin, so it's im mutter ligrum tumul chulin shemeretz Yisrael. So our Mishnah says you're not allowed to because you're increasing tuma, even chulin, which is not allowed. However, l'maskana, we quoted that maybe beitzrin ima kachavim begas, that you are allowed to cause tuma for chulin in Eretz Yisrael. TB 9. Loichin gas be'uta mina akam be'eze gas moiki la be'gemara be'la mishnah achrona. They threw that curveball over here. So in the Mishnah Achrona, so let's see what I wrote. Ima akim kvar matame es hanavim. If you already made them tame, the ein iser latami chulin me'eretz Yisrael. It's a very difficult question, exactly what they're looking for, but I think based on the Mishnah Achrona, basically what it's saying is that we're afraid of the Shita of Rav Huna, right? We hold of the Shita of Rav Huna, this is TB9, and therefore it would be not allowed. However, when it comes to, and that's it, that's all we're looking for. That Ein Darchen Imam Kachavim Megas because of Rav Huna, because it's already, once it's flowing, then it's already considered to be Yayin. And that's kind of what I wrote over here. I wrote the Ein Isser Latami Chulin Shemeretz Yisrael. That's not really what we're looking for over here. Of a poik, if your poik is a senior of a dain yain nesach lefi chad man de'omer, then it's mutter. But if it's open, then it's totally on when it becomes yayin. So according to the Mishnah Achrona, we're chayshish the shita of Rav Huna, and therefore you would not be allowed to do it. Or as it says, ein darchenim al ovi chachavim begas. Ad kan.